Dear friends, welcome to ePathshala. I am Dr. Vishal Jadhav, Department of Sociology, Tilak Maharashtra Vidya-mitra, Pune. Today, we are going to discuss on a module titled Regionalism, Self-Determinism and Ethnic Chauvinism, which is part of the political sociology paper. In the previous modules, we have tried to understand the meaning of nation. According to Benedict Anderson's definition, nation is nothing but an imagined community. According to Partha Chatterjee, India is a nation of many nations, and this was proved especially true in the post-independent period, when there were many subaltern voices from different regions that argued that they were deprived economically, socially, culturally, and politically. These voices demanded separate statehoods. For instance, Telangana, for instance, the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, for instance, the whole idea of carving out Uttarakhand and Chhattisgarh. Thus, this module will try and understand why people demand separate statehoods, what is the logic behind it, what is the logic behind regionalism, and how do political forces and political parties based on regional aspirations get inaugurated in Indian democracy. Regionalism, self-determination and ethnic chauvinism. In the following sections, we will briefly look at various movements for regional and political autonomy that have marked the history of independent India. We will look at movements that have demanded a separate state and or territorial autonomy at the regional level, as in the case of Telangana. We will look at movements where the demand has been autonomy and political control along ethnic lines and against outsiders, as in the case of Assam movement. Lastly, we will look at movements for secession or self-determination which have undergone various mutations and negotiations through the example of Kashmir. In each of these moments, we will go over a brief history of the socio-political context within which these movements emerged. We will look at the demands they made and also the changes within them. And finally, we will try to understand where these movements stand in the present context. It must be stated at the outset that all these movements have complex histories, and it is nearly impossible to do justice to all the aspects of the story. Movements for regional autonomy, Telangana. Regionalism, as mentioned earlier, reflects the aspiration of a region to gain more political power and within a larger political entity like a nation. This could be materialized by carving out a new state or autonomous area or such political and administrative bodies. In India, based on the report submitted by State Reorganization Commission in 1955, the first phase of large-scale reorganization of state boundaries was implemented in 1956. Since then, many changes and further reorganizations have resulted in India having 29 states, 7 union territories and several autonomous districts with varying degrees of autonomy in Manipur, Assam, Tripura, etc. like the Bodoland Territorial Area District in Assam. For a better understanding of these processes, one could look at Majid Akhtar's Regionalism, Developmental Tensions in India, Louis Tillin's, actually we can cut this out. In these ongoing processes of state reorganization, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Uttarakhand were formed in 2000, and the most newly formed state in India is Telangana, which has had a long history of movement of autonomy. Often at the heart of such struggles is an experience of economic and social deprivation and marginalization of the region. The politics of regionalism will be discussed through the example of Telangana movement. The history of the movement for the formation of Telangana state is rooted in the history that precedes colonial rule, even as it is located in present-day economic and social factors. The present-day region of Telangana came under the princely state of Hyderabad. The Nizam, operating through the Deshmukh, who were both landlords and moneylenders, had instituted a highly oppressive system of agrarian labor. Reeling under its effect and inspired by a cultural identity of the people of Telangana that was fomenting, thousands of people revolted against the rule of the Nizam from 1948 to 1951. The movement was led by the Communist Party of India. Finally, the Nizam, who so far was refusing to accede to India, signed the instrument of accession based on condition that the Indian army be called in to crush the revolt. The movement was crushed in 1951 and Telangana became a part of India and got integrated with the Telugu-speaking Andhra region. While the communist history of Telangana movement had long been removed from the discourse, the demand for a separate state continued to be based in terms of economic deprivation of the region of Telangana within the larger Andhra region. From 1952 onwards, agitations like non-mulkis, that is outsiders, began, which highlighted the abysmal treatment of the people from Telangana by officials and administrative bodies run by people from coastal Andhra and district which were part of the Madras Presidency. This agitation turned towards a program for state reorganization. In 1953, State Reorganization Commission of the Indian government, leaders from Congress and Socialist parties opposed the formation of larger Andhra state, Vishal Andhra. While the commission recommended the autonomy of Telangana state, the powerful lobby of Andhra leaders ensured that Telangana stayed within Andhra. The Andhra leaders wanted the Telangana region to be conduit in economic growth of the entire state, while the proponents of Telangana felt that the educational and economic backwardness will be further exploited in this larger formation. However, for many infrastructure and development related issues in Telangana, regional communities were formed. These eventually lost their power and from 1968 onwards the demand for a separate state re-emerged. Over these years and in the future as well, the rich farmers from Andhra emerged as the powerful class, directing resources, particularly irrigated related towards themselves. Tank irrigation declined in Telangana and dependence on pumps and therefore on electricity increased. In coastal Andhra, on the other hand, irrigation facilities were hoarded along with the benefits of the Krishna-Godavari basin. The culture and dialect of the Telangana region also suffered in this long period. The movement for a separate state eventually consolidated under Telangana Rashtra Samiti or TRS, which came into existence in 2001. After decades of agitation, strikes and deaths, in 2013 a resolution was passed in Parliament for the formation of a separate Telangana state, which finally came into existence on 2nd June 2014. K. Chandrasekhar Rao of TRS became the first Chief Minister. The state has retained Hyderabad as the capital. The formation of the new state is too recent to comment upon the changes that might have taken place for the people of Telangana. However, the history of marginalization and agrarian distress pose urgent questions. Ethnic politics and regional aspirations, Assam. The tying up of ethnic origins with regional politics, often termed as sons of the soil mobilization, presents a situation where claims over authentic belongingness are pitched against influx of outsiders. And these outsiders are argued to be responsible for the economic and social marginalization of the original inhabitants of the region. This kind of politics, in the case of Shiv Sena politics in Bombay, saw itself within the federal structure of the nation. The Assam movement, however, reached a phase where separation from India also got raised as a demand. The politics of ethnic chauvinism and its tying up with aspirations of regional autonomy will be discussed through the example of Assam movement. Some texts which can help understand this kind of politics are Thomas Blom Hans's Wages of Violence, Naming an Identity in Post-Colonial Bombay, and Sanjay Barua's India Against Itself, Assam and the Politics of Nationality. While several regional movements express a discontent towards outsiders, few have risen to the scale and violence of the Assam or Axom movement. Starting in 1979 under the banner of All Assam Students Union, a non-party students group, the movement right from its inception pitted itself against outsiders, mostly identified as illegal immigrants from Bangladesh who were supposedly hijacking resources of the state, which was suffering from widespread poverty and unemployment despite being rich in resources like oil and coal and a long history of tea plantations. The complex ethnic composition and long history of migration separation makes Assam quite the opposite of the homogeneous entity of Asomia or Exomia nationalism, which the movement tried to present in its opposition to illegal immigrants assumed mostly to be coming from Bangladesh. Assam is made of various tribal and caste groups. There are Assamese in many parts of Upper Assam, Bengalis in Lower Assam, plains tribes like Bodos, Kachars, Tivas, Koch, Rajbanshis, etc., some of whom have assimilated into Assamese identity, while others maintain their separate identities. Tea plantation owners had bought in laborers from Chota Nagpur region, from Oraon, Santhal and other such communities who lived in Assam for many decades now. Several Muslim peasants came from parts of East Bengal to work for the Assamese landlord. The Brahmaputra Valley was in some senses consolidated under the Ahom kingdom, which largely consolidated only in the 17th century, even though they came and began establishing themselves from the 12th century onward. They were never the rulers of all of Assam, especially when it came to many of the tribal groups. These Ahom rulers also maintained many cultural ties with mainland India and converted to Hinduism. This detour into the ethnic history of Assam is important because it is the claims to a unified history of Assam under the Ahoms that became the rhetoric for excluding outsiders. During the post-partition communal riot, many Bengali Hindus sought shelter in Assam, neighboring East Pakistan. During Bangladesh Liberation War, Bengali Muslims similarly came to Assam seeking a way out of violence. It is this group that was made the target of the anti-outsider movement, against which an ethnic unity of Assamese people was mobilized. The agitation peaked from 1979 onwards, and regular agitation, strike and violence became a part of everyday life. Before this period, the economic failures of the government were already being used by the Assamese middle class to whip up an anti-Bengali sentiment. The most horrific event of this movement, and perhaps one of the most horrific ones in the country, was the Nellie massacre of 1983, when ASU had called for a boycott of state elections. Many people of Bangladeshi origin were promised voting rights by the Indira Gandhi government. Accusing this group of defying the boycott, around 2,200 Muslims, by conservative estimate, were killed in a span of 6 to 7 hours. It is claimed that Tivas, one of the plains tribes who was assimilated into Assamese fold, carried out this massacre. In 1985, the Rajiv Gandhi government signed the Assam Accord, which had provided for securing the ethnic population of the state from encroachment by outsiders. By this time, along with the ASU, a political party by the name of Assam Gana Parishad, or the AGP, had in some ways taken lead of the movement. After the accord, they won the 1986 elections. However, not much changed in the lives of the Assamese people. Another outfit which had emerged during this period was the United Liberation Front of Assam, or the ULFA. This came from a radical group within the Assam movement, which took a militant form and tried to direct the movement against the Indian state. Many Assamese intellectuals lent support to the movement, justifying it on grounds of nationality, federalism, and internal colonialism. While initially finding support in the AGP, slowly ULFA lost its base amongst Assamese people due to its activities, which were turned into large-scale extortion, kidnapping, murders, and acts of terrorism. A counter-insurgency outfit of surrendered ULFA militants, Sulfa, was eventually found to be doing pretty much the same. This also became the starting point for militant groups in the name of various communities of Assam: the National Democratic Front of Bodoland, NDFB, the Karbi National Volunteers, etc. Eventually, with counter-terrorism operations, ULFA was brought to the negotiation table, except one faction of it. However, this entire history has not only turned the various ethnicities which were claimed to be unified under the Assamese banner against each other, it has also set grounds for the continuing marginalization of the Bengali Muslims. The Indian state against which the movement was pitched at one point of time has not given much of recourse except military operations and electoral alliances. The economic conditions of the people remain deprived, no matter what community they come from. For many commentators, the anti-outsider movement was a sentiment that was whipped up by the middle class, which has now created only more others. The root cause of the issues which gave rise to the movement and its militant phase remain unaddressed. Political autonomy and self-determination. In its ultimate form, movements from regional autonomy have also taken the form of demand for a separate nation. The Nagas, since before the independence of India, had demanded a separate nation. The Khalistan movement of 1980s also made such demand for a few years. Here, the question of nationality takes precedence, going beyond autonomy within the federal structure of a nation, and historical, economic, and socio-cultural factors together shape the demand of a separate national identity. Movements for self-determination in India have all taken a violent turn at some point. Armed conflict between groups demanding separation from India and India's states, military and paramilitary forces have obviously resulted in loss of life and property and displacement of ordinary people. In this section, we will look at the Kashmiri and Naga movements in order to understand a context where demands for regional and political autonomy have been in the form of movements for self-determination. Like in other sections, a brief understanding of the movement's history is important in contextualizing it. For an understanding of secessionist movements, some key texts are Balraj Puri's Kashmir, Insurgency and After, Udayan Mishra's The Periphery Strikes Back, Challenges to the Nation-State in Assam and Nagaland, and A.G. Noorani's The Kashmir Dispute, 1947 to 2012. Nagaland. The Naga people, since before independence, saw themselves as separate from the Indian Union. As far back as in 1929, the Naga Club, an all-Naga organization, submitted a memorandum to the Simon Commission that they seek to be independent. Dissatisfied with the prospect of being a part of the Indian Union, the Naga National Council appealed to the British and the Indian government for independence. Their leaders argued that since the Nagas were historically, racially, culturally different from Indians and were never occupied by the Indian rulers, they should be granted freedom as sovereign country when the British would finally leave India. It was decided under the 9-point agreement that in a period of 10 years, the Nagas will be free to decide their future. Indian government's disregard for the agreement led the NNC to declare Nagaland to be independent on 14th August 1947 under the leadership of Zapo Fizo. Indian state continued to disregard Naga demands and sought to have autonomous bodies for hill tribes, wherein Nagas featured as a part of Assam. The NNC, on the other hand, conducted a plebiscite in 1961, which they claimed that 99% of the Naga people wanted an independent Naga nation. They also boycotted elections, following which the Indian state used indiscriminate force to suppress the movement. In this period, that various laws providing extraordinary powers to the defense forces were brought in. T. Sakiri, one of the moderate leaders, was killed in 1956 and many of the NNC had to go underground. In this period, Fizo took charge of the movement, which started to take a militant form. Nagaland became a separate state in 1963, but the leadership was not satisfied with this move. The armed movement continued in all these years, with several reports of excesses committed by the army on the locals. In 1975, Shillong Accord was signed, which came in the backdrop of emergency and extended military repression. Many of the NNC leaders signed the accord, which paved way for their surrender and creating space for peace talks. Disappointed with this, some leaders like Isaac Su, Thu Muvia and Khaplang formed the Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland, or NSCN, in 1980. It gained popular support in the following years, but gradually fragmented into factions. Over the years, the militant aspects of the movement has subsided, leaving aside a few instances. Caught in the middle of the insurgent and counter-insurgent violence, many people have started to see the benefits in integration with the Indian state. Several rounds of peace, including one in 2015, have pointed towards a decline in secessionist political sentiment. But it must be remembered that this stage of integration comes from a violent past and is reflective of a fatigue by non-violence. The Armed Forces Special Power Act of 1958 continues to be in force in the state. Demilitarization, it has been argued, is one of the crucial steps in bringing in a sense of equality and respect, apart from focus on development of the region. If the Indian state is concerned about the integration of Naga people, democratic mechanism, justice, peace and equality have to be ensured. Kashmir. One of the most long-running violent and sensitive conflicts perhaps in the world is that of Kashmir. The kingdom of Jammu and Kashmir at the time of independence was under the rule of Maharaja Hari Singh. The region is divided into three parts. The Jammu Hills and Plains region, which has a Hindu majority. The Kashmir Valley has a Muslim majority, and the Ladakh region, which has Buddhist and Muslim population. Hari Singh wished to rule over the independent state of Jammu and Kashmir, but the region became the center of conflict between India and Pakistan during independence. Sheikh Abdullah, a popular leader of the Secular National Conference, wished the Kashmiri people to not be under the rule of Hari Singh and neither join Pakistan. The demand for Azad Kashmir was resonant. However, Jammu and Kashmir was forced to join the instrument of accession with India, as in 1947 Pakistan had invaded the northwestern region of the state, and Hari Singh sought support from the Indian state in defeating them. It was agreed that after the Pakistani insurgents were driven back, Kashmiri people will decide whether they wish to stay with India. Sheikh Abdullah became the first chief minister of the state. As a result of the invasion, Pakistan captured part of the northwest Kashmir, which remains under its control. Soon after the 1947 war, the demand for autonomy of Kashmir began to be raised. As a consequence, Sheikh Abdullah was removed from his post and arrested in 1953. Till Abdullah's release in 1974, several incompetent governments ruled the state, often coming under the control of the Congress party at the center. There were allegations of rigging in elections. These discontents reached a new stage with the elections of 1987, which were widely believed to have been rigged. In the meanwhile, Farooq Abdullah, Sheikh Abdullah's son, ran a government which was dismissed and then again came to power after negotiations with Congress. It is after this period that the insurgency took roots in Kashmir. The demand for Azad Kashmir, with its multiple interpretations, flourished in the midst of insurgent violence, often supported by Pakistan, and the escalating violence and civil rights abuses by Indian military and paramilitary forces. The demand for Azadi for some means the independence of Kashmir from both India and Pakistan, merger with Pakistan for some, and greater autonomy within the Indian Union for others. Regional groups with different hues have also emerged and command authority in the region. People's Democratic Party, the Hurriyat Conference, Mirwaz Umar Farooq faction and the SAS Gilani faction, Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, Yasin Malik, etc. are some of the crucial parties and leaders at the moment. Amidst all this, the region of Ladakh and Jammu have different aspirations as well. The 1990s was the most violent decade for the people of Kashmir, whose daily lives were very much suspended. Since early 2000, the insurgent forces have been on the decline, but the resentment amongst the ordinary people is high. The stories of ordinary people being picked up and tortured, rapes of women by men of security forces, the enforced disappearances of local men are abound and have been reported by different human rights organizations. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act continues to be in force in the state. It must be understood that amidst competing claims, it is the idea of Kashmiriyat, a secular culture of Kashmir, that many people defend and argue for when they talk about Azad Kashmir. In this understanding, the massed exodus of Kashmiri Pandits who were driven away by the fundamentalist militants is seen as a loss of this very history and culture. For the defenders of Kashmiriyat, it is hoped that the Kashmir Pandit will return, as will harmony in the region. With the militancy being more or less curtailed, it is the aspirations and quality of Kashmiri people that the Indian nation has to sincerely respond to. Instead, what we have seen time and again is highly emotive responses which offer no solutions to the complex problem of the region. Thus, in this module, we have seen that The nature of Indian democracy itself is one of the major reasons for this whole reason of asking for separate regions. Identities based on caste, based on language, based on region, based on other kinds of ethnicities are part and parcel of Indian democracy. It is no wonder then that we find voices, especially from the margins, that demand separate statehoods because they feel that as a nation they have been deprived for very long, economically, politically, culturally and socially. Thank you.